today we are here to review Axis and Allies D-Day.
D-Day. Bum, bum, bum.
So, anyone who has watched my video knows that my number one pick for all-time games is because it was a big influence on my life is the Games Master series by it was originally by Milton Bradley. They were acquired by Hasbro. Hasbro bought up pretty much all of the American gaming market during the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and pretty much killed the business in America for many years. So I stopped buying games for probably about 15, 20 years almost. But I always would play Axis and Allies and Fortress America. So in the early 2000s, they released under the Avalon Hill company umbrella that they had acquired as a part of Wizards of the Coast. They released a whole series of games in the style of these advanced strategy games like the Games Master series. And this is one of the re-release. I think this was a 2004.
2004.
So you want to go ahead and go into the stats?
So Board Game Geek gave it a 6.4 rating. The designer is Larry Harris, which I believe has designed like all of them, right?
Yeah, Larry Harris was the developer or designer of all these. And I got to meet him at my first Gen Con. It was
that's cool.
One of the highlights of my...
Too bad you didn't have a copy to have him sign it for.
But I got to shake his hand. He was talking the game we were playing. He was actually at the table with us, but he didn't play. But
that is cool.
I got to shake his hand and tell him how influential he was in my gaming career.
That's pretty awesome.
So that was really cool.
Co-designed by Mike Selinker. Art, there's quite a few artists involved in here. Tommy Lee Edwards, Todd Gamble, Craig Gibson, and Ryan Sandsaber, and Peter Whitley. Now, on MSRP, there's still an MSRP of $44.99. I think it's out of print, though.
Yeah.
But you can find it on Amazon for $35, and I saw a copy on the Geek Market for $10.
Yeah. Well, they're
assuming it's all
it's probably not complete.
Yeah, you don't know, but
so this one, what's interesting about this game is all the other Axis and Allies, you have factories and you use money to determine how much you're going to produce and what items you're going to produce. This one is tactical, so they've taken all of that out. This is probably the most accessible of the Axis and Allies games because it tells you how to play it front to back. So it's a different style completely than any of the other games. It's only a two-player game, really, but it says 2 to 3 because you could split up the Allies and have one play Britain and one play United States, but it's really designed for 2 players. As far as the quality of components, Axis and Allies has always done really nice little miniature fit soldiers and such. What they upped the game when they did the Avalon Hill series is they actually styled all the different tanks to look like the style that would be for the given countries. And I thought that was really cool. So the Germans have better tanks than the Americans and the British, and the style, the figures are the style of those tanks. They custom made all the planes to look like the different planes from the different countries. Everything is customized to the country, and they did that for pretty much all the games from this 2000 era Axis and Allies release, which I thought was really cool. The card stock is not very good. It's not even rounded off corners. It's just really solid square. But you don't shuffle these even. You just put them in. They're sequenced and these are not really used for playing like a normal card. This really drives the turn order. Right,
but I could see though if you were to play this a lot, you would still go through those cards and damage them quite a bit because you do run through them every round.
Yeah.
So even though you don't shuffle them, you do handle them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you could sleeve them. I haven't, and it's not really these haven't really shown anywhere. I mean,
right, but this is the first time I've played it.
First time you've played it, but I've played this many, many times. The box is probably going to get banged up more than anything because you're rolling those dice in it. And I'm not going to sleeve a box.
You're not into?
No, I'm just not into that.
You could lay them out, but all right.
One of the things, this game is a kind of a beast to set up, but it's probably the least beast-like all the Axis and Allies.
Axis and Allies 1942 was
it takes a long time because you've got spaces on the board and they actually have the pictures of what goes on those spaces, and all of your reinforcements are laid out and placed in specific orders, which we'll get to a little bit later, But the nice thing about it is it puts itself away because
Mhm.
as your figures die, you don't get them back.
Back in the box.
They just go back in a big death pool over here. So yeah, you don't get them back, so you just put them away as you kill them. So the game's really easy to put away because there's not very many figures left on the board unless you concede like I did. But yeah, I mean it's much easier to deal with than a lot of the other Axis and Allies games. The board is really nice. It's a 3-fold board, or actually this one's a 6-fold board.
Yeah, 6-fold.
But it's the same size as all the other big board games. Even the old Axis and Allies used to be a 3-fold. They turned it into a 6-fold, but it still fits into the same.
But I think it's still a bigger map.
Yeah, it's a smaller box though. It doesn't. This is a lot smaller than the old Axis and Allies from the Milton Bradley era. So yeah, I mean everything about this it's styled, much better than the original Axis and Allies as far as for storage. Well, the others had the little styrofoam things for individual storage for the units, which I guess were okay, but they didn't have any tops to them. As far as quality, I mean, given the boards are really thin, I should point that out. They're not great, but they're functional. I'm going to give this a 7 just because I think they did a nice job on all the figures, and the board is really nice. I think it's a 7.
If you ever see my reviews, I think that I always try my best to consider it for when the game was made. So this was made in 2004, and I think in 2004 this is probably some pretty high quality stuff. I mean, I think the fact that they got individual cards that were, I mean, they're not quite laminated, but they got a good finish on them. So it's they're not waterproof, but they're still, I think for back then, it's pretty darn nice quality. The board is pretty nice, especially for a 2004 game, in my opinion. The minis are great for 2004 because you didn't probably see that many games other than the Axis and Ally games or maybe the other Game Master games that had a substantial amount of minis in them. So I think I'm going to go a little bit higher and go 7.5.
Okay. As far as theme, obviously this is World War II. This is specifically the invasion, storming of Normandy, and the D-Day. And it really does give you a good feel for how the slaughtering that occurred on the beaches. I mean, all of the player boards, as far as getting your reinforcements, have the names of the actual ships that were loading from those,
and the name of the squadrons.
The divisions. Yeah, I mean, they did
it's really neat.
A lot of history went into this game. I really appreciate that. And and all the beaches are named: Omaha Beach, Utah Beach, all the ones that are familiar with any World War II buffs.
And they go into more detail too as well. So like on Sword Beach, it says that the invasion of the British 3rd Infantry Division occurred here. It's got the name of the houses. What are they called again?
Bunkhouses.
The bunkhouses. So it's got all those named and the little villages in the area. I mean, they really went all out as far as the historical, I think, accuracy of naming the naming convention of the game.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It's really, they did a nice job in honoring this. I really appreciate all the work that they put into this. I mean, other than that, it's just dice rolling and slaughtering units.
Yeah.
But it does give you.
But that's what D-Day was.
Yes. So. It gives you the feel of. I mean, all the Axis and Allies do, but this one in particular, I think, has a lot more of the history on the board.
On the board, yeah, absolutely.
So thematically, I'm going to give this one an 8.5.
I think I could agree with that because it's clearly a lot of work, both in the design for the graphic design of the board. I don't know about the rule book yet. I don't know what kind of details that went in that for like flavor of the history. But just seeing all the board information in your player board information, it's a lot of work. So it deserves it. It deserves an 8.5.
All right. Well, let's talk about the rule book. So, this, again, is probably the easiest game to pick up of Axis and Allies. It's got, I mean, it's being someone who's played Axis and Allies my entire life, it was no problem at all. But I think even someone who's not done that, given the fact that if you had somebody who has played a game like this before, to teach them, they're going to pick it up no problem because it walks you through the turns on the cards. So, all you need to know in here, they got the game set up, which is really just telling you the turn order and the factions, and it doesn't really not go into a lot of detail. The units and what their movement or attack abilities are. As far as where you set up all the starting pieces is on here. Sequence of play, which is just taking the actions, which you really don't even need to read because you can just follow the cards. It goes into the combat and how you do combat, which is important because, obviously that's key to this game. The block houses. So I said bunk houses, block houses.
Yeah, block houses. Okay.
One thing that was unique that they added to this game, and I think a few of the other ones, in this case, they added 2 expansions with the game that you can add, which I thought was really cool. They added some expansions to it, but you can add, in addition to the order cards, they have, for the advanced rules, they have fortune cards and tactics cards, which can be mixed into the deck.
Okay. They
still flow in the same sequence as everything else, but it just gives you additional like one-time events that happen and stuff like that. We didn't play with those, but it needs to change up the game pace. Right. The rulebook is really straightforward. There's not a lot of history in here, like you were kind of mentioning. It's really focused on the gameplay. There's a little letter at the front that gives you a little bit of flavor, but that's about it. Most of the history is on the board and on the player boards. I'll give this an 8. I mean, it's a good rule book. Yeah. It's really well written. There's not a lot of pictures in it, though. It's mostly.
But you really don't need it.
Yeah. Honestly, it probably deserves more from the standpoint that the cards really step you through the game, which was a unique experience for Axis and Allies. Well, that's my assessment of the rules. So let's go into gameplay. So the gameplay in this, if you've played any Axis and Allies game, you're familiar with it. You move into spaces. You have a certain number of units you can place in spaces in this game, which is 8 for each side. That can be land units. And you roll dice. You have a certain target number. You have to roll under in Axis and Allies.
Equal to or under.
Equal to or under. And for each unit, it varies. Men are 1s, tanks are 3s. When you're attacking, defending-wise, the Germans get the edge on the defense on the tanks.
It's a little bit of a better tank.
Yeah. So there's, basically this is all land combat. There's planes in it, but the planes are really just there to restrict movement.
And punish you if you do move.
Yes. They're just, they basically serve the function of anti-aircraft guns in Axis and Allies. So just like in World War II, by the time the D-Day happened, the German Air Force was pretty much depleted. So it's basically the Americans and the British have the Air Force, and even that's not really big in this. It's just a few planes. But yeah, they're there just to support the land units. But the gameplay in this is all driven, as we mentioned several times, by these order cards, which are sequenced. So that each time you're going to flip a card, and it tells you exactly what you do.
And the battle board here reminds you of those as well.
Yeah, so everything is sequenced. You just do the actions as the cards tell you and flip the next card. It's super easy to follow. So if you have ever had an interest in any of these type of war games but thought they were too intimidating, this is the one to get.
Because there's like, I wouldn't say 0, but maybe out of 100, maybe a 10 in strategy.
Yeah.
It's all tactics.
Yeah. So, I mean, this one is definitely a good starter for any of the Axis and Allies games, I would say. Even as an advanced player, I like it because it's very focused. You don't have a whole lot of clutter. It's 10 rounds and it's over. One way or the other. It's actually technically 9 rounds because you have to, as the Americans and British, you have to claim 3 major cities and hold them for a round. So if you haven't claimed those 3 cities by round 9, you can't possibly win in round 10. So basically, it's a 9-round game with 1 bonus round.
Right.
But it goes way faster than the other Axis and Allies games.
For sure. We played this. I mean, broken up, but still was maybe a 3-hour game in the 2 days it took us.
I think it's less than that.
I think so?
Yeah. I mean, it was probably maybe 2 hours dedicated, 2.5 hours at the most.
And, Randy and we played a lot of Axis and Allies back in the day. We haven't played it in a long time, but back when I first started gaming and hanging out with Randy, that's pretty much all we played was Axis and Allies and Fortress America. That was about it. And we would play one game of Axis and Allies for a whole weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember it just taking days, and it was so much fun. But
because nobody can see.
Yeah. But this, you're looking at 2 to 3 hours, and then you're done.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it goes really fast, and it's got a different feel, I think, than the other Axis and Allies.
I agree.
And it simplifies. You don't have to worry about the purchasing. Your reinforcements are all sequenced for you.
It's probably the most streamlined way of playing Axis and Allies.
Yeah, you roll 2 dice, and you get that number of units, and you get to decide where you're going to allocate them as far as
based
where
off
they come
of which
in.
side of your board. For me, I either do it on the left side of the map or the right side of the map. For you, it was the same idea. But
You have landing zones.
But you have different landing zones, so you have a little bit more variety of how to differentiate where they go. So, and that's where a little bit of your strategy can come in, is for you, how your units are coming in. For me, it's kind of like where I divide them up and move them on the map. That's about all the strategy there is, though. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is, if you don't mind the dice chucking games, I mean, I personally don't like Board Game Geek's ratings for these games because I think they really bias it against the luck-based die rolling games. And, if you're sitting down to play one of these, it's a dice rolling luck-based game.
You're going in knowing what you get.
Yeah. So, I personally don't mind those from time to time. I don't want to play a luck game of dice every time, but you know what the odds are when you're going in. You've got a unit, it can get hit on a 1, you got a 1 in 6 chance of hitting it. So you have to do the math in your head to figure out, what am I going in, underpowered or overpowered?
Right.
And, take your chances, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I don't mind that at all in these kind of games.
And just also understand, not only is it luck based, but there's really no way to mitigate the luck.
Yeah.
So it's just true dice chucking at its greatest.
Yeah. So as far as this version in particular of Axis and Allies, I'm gonna give this one an 8. I think it's one of the better ones of the Axis and Allies set that came out in that 2000 era. It's probably my favorite of the ones that came out in that era. And it's not up there with Fortress America or the original Axis and Allies by any means, or even the 2000 era remake of Axis and Allies. But it's probably right the next one below it as far as my favorites.
I'm going to agree with an 8 because, like you said, I'm going in, I know what kind of game this is. Is this the World War II game I prefer to play? It is not. Not even close. I prefer Memoir 44 or one of the other Command and Collar type games because it's luck based, but there's a way to mitigate the luck in that game. So I think it's a little bit more strategic in that regard. And I just enjoy it more because it's got more flavor involved in those games. But as a dice chucker, it's a ton of fun. And it was just, it hurts when you roll poorly, and it feels great when you roll well. And so you can't beat that. And so it's just a good feeling, or you just like, but it's still a cool feeling. So even if you lose miserably, it's still a lot of fun. So I agree. I think this is a solid 8.
Yeah, so if you don't have a lot of these type of games on your shelf,
this is a good one to
This is a good one if you're just wanting to break into it and give it a try. If you can track it down, because it's out of print, as we mentioned. But, if it is truly a full set for $10,
jump on it
on a Board Game Market. That's really a good price. But, I mean, it's worth it just for the pieces alone.
Yeah. So, because even if you don't use it for this game, you could use it for other World War II games.
Yeah.
Because the pieces are pretty neat.
Yeah. So that's our assessment of Axis Allies D-Day. I'm glad we got this one to the table finally because I'm just, we haven't played
you
one of these
talked about it a lot, and I just never got to play it.
Yeah, we've not played any of these type of games as far as reviews go. So it was good to get one of these classic dice chucking.
We need to get
war
Fortress
games.
America out.
Oh, I love Fortress America.
I
can already spoil that one for you.
I don't win very often, but it's a fun game.
Yeah. So
I don't get to play America.
So what's that?
So I don't get to play America.
You can. I don't mind playing the Invaders.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so as far as subscribe, hit the button. We'd love to have you follow along with us.
Make some comments. Which version of Axis and Allies do you like, if any of them at all? Or what other World War II games that you like to play?
Or war games in general.
In general, yeah. Because we love war games.
Yeah, well, as long as they're not like overly complex. I'm not into the big.
I do have Squad Leader, and I would love to play Squad Leader.
I do not like the 3M games at all, but something that's lighter than the 3M games. But I mean, any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. And hit the bell,
the notifications.
Yep. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.